Good afternoon, everybody. It's a bit of a first. I think most people know that around here, so bear with me as we work through some nerves and figure out how to go about this from up here. Hopefully I don't get sick. Subject this afternoon is going to be the third commandment. It's one that means a lot to me. Is just to refresh everybody's memory. This will be Exodus 20, verse 7. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Well, before digging into this meaning here, I'd like to answer questions I sometimes hear in the world, not necessarily in this crowd, but why study the law, the commandments specifically? They've been nailed to the cross. We're not under the law, but we're under grace. They're referring to Colossians 2, 13 through 15 and Romans 6, 14. And I'll agree with the verses, but not the way that it's generally being applied. Even Google can answer that this one, not under the law. This does not mean that Christians are exempt from obeying God's moral law. Rather, it signifies from being justified, declared righteous through adhering to the law, to being justified through faith in Jesus Christ. Under grace emphasizes the undeserved, unmerited favor of God. Salvation which is received through Christ, faith in Christ. You read John 14, verse 15, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And John 15:10, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. In Mark 12:29, a lawyer once asked Jesus, which was the great commandment? Jesus answered by quoting them the Shema, Deuteronomy 6:5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. He then continued and he said, a second like unto it is this, that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. If something hangs on it, it depends upon it. That's what supports it and keeps it from falling. So to paraphrase, all the law and all the prophets taught, and all that the prophets taught were based on these two commandments. So the commandments are meant to teach us how to love the Lord my God with all my heart, my soul, and my mind, and my neighbor as myself. That's what these commandments are supposed to be doing for me. So studying them will instruct me in what I need to do and not do in order to fulfill these two commandments. With that in mind, let's go back to Exodus 20. And with a quick recap, Israel's wandering in the desert. They've been freed from slavery there in Egypt. They've been there 430 years. God's made himself undeniably known among the people with massive, awesome displays of his power and sovereignty over all creation. He's waged war against the Egyptian gods. He's gone before them and split the sea open so they pass on dry land. He's appeared as a pillar of fire and a cloud during the day. He's fed a manna from heaven. He's made himself where there is no question as to his existence. And all those plagues, they sat there and they went counter to the culture that they were living in. All these Egyptian gods that were given credit for whether it was the harvest, whether it was fertility, whether it was afterlife, all these plagues sat there and stomped right in the face of those ideas. So now you got these people coming in and God's going to make a covenant with them. And a formal agreement, a promise. This is going to be God's contract with them at this time. And he lays out the first commandment. He says, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. So we have God reminding them who he is, what he's done for them already, because there was that recap right before the commandments there. And therefore they're to have no other gods. He's saying there's no need for it. There's no doubting of who I am and that I rule over all. I've shown you this. Just don't have any other gods. It tells them there in the second commandment, not to make any graven image or likeness of anything that is heaven above or on the earth beneath it or in the waters beneath the earth. That they're not to bow down to them. They're not to serve them. For I, the Lord, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to the thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. So number one, no other God before me. Number two, don't make any pictures or statues or anything like that to bow down to them, to serve them. And we get to number 3. Don't take my name in vain. Or as it's formerly put, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. It sounds pretty ominous to me. I'm not going to be held guiltless. It means I can have blame assigned to me for this transgression. Well, I probably ought to know exactly what this means. I've heard many times throughout my life, people always just liken it to, in essence, a blasphemy law. Of saying some kind of curse associated with God, like often uttered in frustration. And then I've been told that that's what it means to take the Lord's name in vain. Not so much in these crowds that I find myself in nowadays. But, well, I definitely don't think that we should be doing that. That's not what this commandment is talking about. We go ahead and we look at some of our root words that are used here. When it says to not take, that word take is nasah. N-A-S-A-H. Strong's 5375, if anybody's interested in that. And what that means is to take away, to carry off, to bear up. You can think of it as like a big heavy tote that you're lifting up onto your shoulder. It's a burden. It's something that you carry as you go forward. That's what that word means. So there's the idea that I'm receiving something, and I have a responsibility to lift it, to carry it. What is it that I'm carrying? The name of the Lord. I've just got done hearing, who he is, how I'm supposed to not worship. I don't need anybody else. I'm not supposed to be serving anybody else. And hey, you're going to be known by my name. Don't bear it in vain. So what's that word vain mean? Well, it means worthlessness, especially in conduct. Emptiness, vanity, falsehood. Emptiness, nothingness, falsehood. Worthlessness of conduct. So in vain means doing it without producing anything good and while incurring bad. I'm bringing discredit upon him. If we're to be called by his name, we're to be a credit to him and not to bring his name low, nor to have him cursed by the nations because of our conduct. As all you guys know, I was in the Marine Corps. I served 9 years in that. I joined right out of high school. My mom and dad were both Marines, and most of my family were military of one form or another. So there's a lot of aspects of it that were easily understood by me as I went in. One thing that's a little bit different about Marine Corps boot camp, if you don't know, like Marine Corps boot camp's 13 weeks. It's the longest, it's the toughest. Of course, everybody knows this part. But the other thing is you're not referred to as a Marine when you go to Marine Corps boot camp. Everywhere else you go to Army boot camp, they're going to call you a soldier. You go to Navy boot camp, they're going to call you a sailor. You go to Air Force boot camp, they're going to call you an airman. Marine Corps, you're not called a Marine. You ain't earned that yet. You're called a recruit. A few other choice words. But you're never called a Marine. And they make a big deal of it at the end. So going on at about 12 weeks through, we have something we call the crucible. And there's a whole nother sort of thinking about it when we think about our Old Testament and how God refers to himself as the one who tends the refiner's fire. We go through this crucible, and it's a couple days of hardship and team building exercise and food deprivation and sleep deprivation and long marches and things of that nature. And it's our culmination of all of our training. And when you get done at that, they have a ceremony. You're dog tired, and you go and you stand in a formation, and they take that little itty bitty Eagle Globe and Anchor, the emblem of the Marine Corps, and they hand it to you, and they shake your hand, and for the first time, they say, "Well done, Marine." That's a big deal. It makes me also think of that, "Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into my rest." So the Marine Corps is jockeying God's style a little bit in all of this. But it meant something. It was a big deal. And from that moment forward, now I'm allowed to have these name tapes on my camouflage utilities that identify me as a U.S. Marine. Before that, nah. Before that, I'm a recruit. I don't rate that. I don't get a name tag. I've got my name. I don't have the institution. And so when they do that, they dress you down a little bit. They make sure that they're going to stress the importance of this to you. That this isn't something to be taken lightly. And every weekend that I was in the Marine Corps, we'd end up having a safety stand down. They'd have like a little thing where they're just admonishing you, like when you go out on the town, don't be getting up to no good. Don't be, drinking and driving. Don't be, getting into fights. Don't be carousing. They're warning you off of all this bad doing. And they tell you that because if you're getting in trouble, it's not going to be a matter of, Smith did this or, it's going to be Marine did this. That's going to be the headline that everybody reads. And so now you're going to be bringing discredit upon the institution of the United States Marine Corps. And don't do that. And that's what I see when I read this third commandment. God's saying, hey, you're going to be known as mine. Don't be bringing discredit upon my good name by going out there and betraying, not behaving as you should, by cheating those around you, by lying to those around you, by not being able to keep your word, by being evil, by not being concerned with doing good. Romans 2:24, the charge is, for the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. He's talking to the Jews there in Rome. Because for the last at least 1,000 years there, they were supposed to be known. They were known as the people of the book. That's what a lot of the surrounding nations call them, the people of the book. And when I read the Old Testament, I see God's charge throughout the whole thing that they're supposed to be sticking to this moral law that God's already set out for them. They're going to be a peculiar people set aside for Him. And they're going to be so good in the way that they treat those around them that people are going to be interested in coming to know their God. They're going to be like, wow, those Hebrews, those Israelites, those Jews, they're kind, they're loving, they're always helping their neighbor. Who are they? Who is this God they serve so that we can be like them? That's not exactly how it worked out, but that's what it was supposed to be. And then Jesus had to come onto the scene and show everybody how wrong they were getting everything. Just how poorly they had handled God's instruction to those around them. And as it says there from Paul, for the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. We can all be guilty of the same thing. I don't know how many times over the years when I've tried to talk to somebody about faith, when I've tried to talk to somebody about the church, when I've tried talking to somebody about how important God is to me and why I think that they ought to be finding some place that they can attend, that the first thing off of their lips is a story about how they were wronged, or about this hypocritical Christian that they knew, or somebody that harmed them within the church and didn't give a good example of how they were supposed to live. And so, I want nothing to do with those guys. A bunch of hypocrites. I'm probably guilty of that at some point in my life, of being the reason why somebody might have decided that they had no time for God or they didn't want any association with Him. But I don't want to be guilty of it anymore. It's something that stays forefront of my thinking. That I represent Christ. I represent God. I'm called by the name Christian. And that means something. And I don't want to be guilty of defaming Him, of causing somebody to stay away from Him. For God delivers it up to desires that we all turn to Him, that we all be saved, that we all be known as Christians. I heard somebody explain it like this once. There was a debate that I was watching. It was taking place on the college campus. And they'd ask the person, well, what do you say about all these people that are hypocrites, that belong amongst the church? And he pointed out, he asked if they knew Beethoven, Mozart. Well, yeah, because great composers, right? Made some of the greatest symphonies that all of mankind has been able to enjoy throughout all history. He said, well, yeah. So now you sit there and you hear somebody playing Mozart, and they're doing it poorly. Now, do you say Mozart's crap? Like that he's not worth listening to, that this is bad music? Or do you acknowledge the fact that this person's playing Mozart poorly? And I was like, well, yeah, obviously that guy's playing Mozart poorly. He goes, well, so then how are you going to blame God and Jesus for people playing Christian poorly? Now, it doesn't absolve us from doing it as best as we can. maybe it stresses all the more importance of why we should be trying to do it to the best of our ability. But all of us are going to be falling short of that example. None of us are going to be able to play Jesus as well as he did. We're limited in that. I think GB did a real good job this morning with his lesson. I thought of a lot of these things while I was hearing him speak. And there's a saying I heard, I don't know if I got it from an old country song or something at one point, but it said that you need to be the same person on Saturday night as you were on Sunday morning. I think that's a pretty important thing that we all ought to keep in mind. Doesn't matter if I'm at work and I'm around a bunch of guys who, I've never gone out of my way to tell people that I'm cursed, and I'm sure I'm guilty of it at times, especially when I get excited and I'm not thinking as I revert back into old ways of talking, or I'm sharing a story from back in the day. Unfortunately, once you allow your head to think a certain way about things and to learn certain adjectives, it becomes a struggle to not let them out. You have to really measure and keep each word. But I know that nowadays, people at work know that I have a faith, and they know that I try and tell a lie, and I know that they're willing to come up to me and talk to me on these subjects. And they have no misgivings that I think that I'm better than them, or that I think I'm doing it all right or perfectly. Because one of the things I highlight in all of this is, yeah, I'm guilty. I'm no better than you. I'm not no better than them. The only difference is I'm striving after it each day. I'm sure there's a lot of them that might even do a better job of it if they were to wrap around their heads that was the goal to which they were working. But that's what we're all called here to do. To think about it. To live out that third commandment, because it does still apply. Not bear his name in vain. That's it for as far as my thoughts on this subject. Never want to close without an invitation. So if there's anybody who needs to be baptized into the name of Christian, or if there's anything that us or the rest of the church could pray for you on, that you need to confess, that you'd like to ask prayers for, please feel free to come forward as we stand and sing.
I want to be